are live. Thank you for watching, family. My name is Brother Greg, aka The Real Gilo. Thank you for, if you're on a replay, as we say in Hawaii, mahalo nui loa. Today's broadcast is brought to you by archon.com. If you're looking for, I don't have one in front of me, but if you're looking for a tripod mounting solutions, if you're, like a content creator, if you like doing TikToks, YouTube videos, go to archon.com. Get your tripods, mounting solutions for even DSLRs. If you're someone that is a professional truck driver and you need mounting equipment for your, all of your equipment in your truck, or maybe you do, like Uber Eats or what's the other one? Lyft, Uber driver. Or if you do those food delivery stuff, go to archon.com. Get yourself a tripod, mounting solutions. Maybe you're like me and my wife. We like watching YouTube videos late at night and having a good laugh, and the phone just hits you right in the face. You need a tripod. Put the phone right up next side, like up. I almost said upside. That's like a southern term. Oh my God. Right next to your bed. Put the tripod right there with your phone, that we don't have black eye syndrome. Archon.com. Make sure you put in Hawaii at the checkout and you get 20% off your entire order. Okay, I got through that. Holy smokes, that was tough. Well, family, do me a favor. If you haven't shared this out, repost it. I appreciate it. We are live on YouTube, Twitch, X, Rumble, and Kick, which is a new live stream platform. They actually are in beta, so we're testing them out, and we definitely appreciate that. I am excited, family. Today's guest, I don't know if I'm going to make it throughout her entire resume and credentials. I just know that she's awesome. Her name is Sarah Listi. I think I said it right, Sarah Listi. She is the founder of Two Girls Garage. I reached out to her because I've been doing a series on America at Work. And it's just something that I felt led to do here on social media, to share with you guys, not so much the political aspect of people working or not working, but to really showcase people that are very essential to our workforce, but also people that have a passion for sharing their craft and their profession. Sarah's very interesting. She is the founder of her, not just her website, but it's a blog, and also she teaches people how to build stuff. I think the term, she's a homesteader. I think that's the term. I'm still learning that myself. But she's an amazing I think the word I use on social media, she's a master woodworker. She's a tool evangelist. I think she's a power tools evangelist. I don't know if that's even a word, but I just decided to call her an evangelist because she has such an amazing repertoire of tools. She has what I would consider my dream workshop. Even though I don't know how to use all those tools, that would be my dream workshop. She's also a very avid content creator, does amazing videos, as you'll see. She's got quite a bit of followers on Instagram, and here on X, for those of you that watch on X, got a pretty good following and some pretty good momentum. And so we're excited to have her. I'm done talking. We're going to play a short introductory video, and in about 44 seconds, you're going to get a chance to meet Sarah Listi, the founder of Two Girls Garage.
I was jamming.
that took me forever to work through. Sometimes I'm good, and sometimes every time I get started, it's my heart is pounding. It's like I gotta get this, and then I'm like, did I miss anything? I always get nervous. So
you killed it. It's so much easier said than done. Like, I think being in front of the camera, especially when there's people watching, is totally different than even like so much of what I do is like recorded and then I edit and then post. Like, that's hard enough. But when people are around and there's distraction, oh my God, it's a lot. Like,
the thing is,
try to get it out.
I love it because I'm just analyzing myself, but I'm really bad in post, and I think it's part of it is being lazy growing up in
Yeah.
terms of the finished product. I just wanted to get it out and go out and play. That was my mindset. So
Honestly, I when I started content creation in general, right? Like live streaming wasn't really, it was kind of like between like Twitch, for example, being like the thing and YouTube really being the big push, right? Or Instagram. And honestly, like I wish I had gone that route because it's so hard to like film. I have hundreds of hours, like thousands of hours of footage on my phone. And sometimes sitting down and editing it takes so much that I'm the same way. I just wish I could just say it and get it out and just be done. Like here it is. Enjoy.
so you started. Let's get right into your woodworking
Yeah.
because I definitely want to get into that. Um, when did you start woodworking? At what age?
So this is such an interesting story. Honestly, I like to joke that like I kind of grew up with a power tool in my hand. My dad was sort of like the original like DIYer. Like the soundtrack to my childhood was like Bob Vila and like Home Improvement and all of those like classic This Old House shows. Like, and I so much I take after him where that like hunger for knowledge and desire to like figure it out and to push yourself to try new things and honestly, it's something I really admire. My dad worked a full time job and then would do all of these things on the weekend, from like rebuilding engines to one of the biggest things that I would say like really got me interested in it because we were always helping him do stuff, but he
Right.
built an addition on the back of my childhood home so that my sisters and I could all have our own bedrooms, which when you're like 10, that's a big deal. Like that was, I mean, I just was in awe that he could do that and to like actually dream something up in his mind and make it happen. And so obviously I always was interested in it, and then I took time in my early 20s. I was a stay-at-home mom for several years. I mean, I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old now, and when my son was a couple of years old, he had gone through a lot. He was diagnosed with autism at 4, so that took a little longer, but there were
At
certain
four?
at 4. It was
Wow.
there's a lot there. There was
Okay.
he had like recurring ear issues, and so there was like some of it was like how much of it is this, how much of it is that, and so it took. I mean, he was 4 and a half really. And honestly, there were so many things that we needed to like help make things easier around the house. And so I kind of one day was like, I'm just going to build this. I'm just going to make this. And so I credit him a lot with it because, you know, I had the natural ability from my dad and like the background and being able to do stuff myself. And, he really taught us to like, don't bring somebody else in, at least try to fix it. Like it's your time, but like, if you have the tools, go for it. But then I credit Ben with really pushing me to like create things to make life easier for him and for us at home when we need it. And honestly, he loved working with his hands and the sensory experience of building things in general. And so it was this really cool early experience for me as a mom where we got to really connect. And especially with a kiddo with autism, he was nonverbal till he was 6 and a half. It really was such an impactful, like, I don't know how I could have not come out of it falling in love with the experience. And honestly, now I would say the same. I love the feel, the touch, the smell, the entire experience of being in the shop makes it so worth every moment. So that's how I got into it. And then I took it into a million directions and I started the business itself back. I mean, gosh, really, it hasn't been that long ago since I really started doing more commission pieces. Like I did a few, and then I really was like, okay, I'm going to make a business out of this. And that was 7 years ago, probably. So, I mean, it's, riding the waves, riding the waves.
I want to play a video. So
Sure.
and we'll talk about some of the terminology. I know what
Yeah.
you meant, but some of the people may not. But we'll cover that. I want to play a
Okay. I
video.
love it.
I had to take out your music just because I don't want to get dinged on my
Don't
end
do that.
because
Yeah.
they'll flag me. So
I rarely use it anymore for that reason because I do not like getting those notices about monetization. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So I now pay for a music service so I don't get
Okay.
dinged for it. It's just not the popular music people know about, but
I need to look into that. You have to tell me your source.
yeah. I'll send it to you.
Okay, good.
Here we go, and we can talk about this after.
Yeah.
what they don't know. It's where I've been and who I am, all the ways I've grown. Blood in the sweat, tears and regret made me hard as stone. On my own, on my own. Put the work in, yeah, I earned it. It's my destiny. Yeah, I'm on top, can't be stopped. Shooting my shot. Oh, oh, oh. Yeah, I'm the one. I'm a legend. Get what I want. Oh, oh, oh. Yeah, I'm on top, can't be stopped. Shooting my shot. Oh, oh, oh. Yeah, I'm the one. I'm a legend. Get what I want. Oh, oh, oh. Do a double take, see me on fire, see that I can't break. Knew I'd be great, knew I would rise through all of the pain. All of the love, start with it now, keeper of all faith. Never change. Put the work in, yeah, I earned it. It's my destiny.
I was jamming the whole time, by the way.
First of all, content aside, I want to just uh we're both married, kids.
Yeah.
We have a life that's very taxing outside of social media.
Sure.
One thing I want to really highlight, and I think this is important, and we're not gonna like just highlight one like girls or guys, but here this is very important. And this is what I notice about your work and your content. There are very few people that are willing to be open with their life, and don't take this the wrong way, but you're willing to
No.
show your entire body in a video without the context of how do I look. I'm not saying you don't care how you look, but there are some people that will never show their
Yeah.
like who they are. They'll just show a filtered version, and nothing wrong with filters. But I think a lot of people on social media they will not show themselves on. There's a filter
Yeah.
and there's a right angle,
Right.
and I think that's
Honestly, it's funny, you know, I'm sure you get the same sort of thing with social media, and you hear a lot, right? There's a lot of criticism. I have totally been criticized so much physically. I have heard some ridiculous things. The comments, like, honestly, sometimes I think I post something that's like super benign and I'm just using a tool and I'm working and whatever. And what people will notice from that is mind blowing to me. Obviously, I'm 37, so I'm knocking on 40's door. Physically, I am proud of myself and my body. I've created kids. I've done amazing things. I've built amazing things. But I'm not a model, right? I'm not a size 00. I'm not. I don't want to lean into appearance as a reason for people to find my content interesting. If anything, I just want people to focus on what we're talking about, what we're doing. But I found that at the end of the day, I was going to be sexualized no matter what. And it's a very sad aspect of it. So I just do what I'm doing. And I'm self-conscious about it at times. And my husband would tell you, like, I have days where I'm like, oh my God, people are saying all these mean things, or they just keep noticing XYZ, and it's like so frustrating. But I don't let it control what I'm putting out, because at the end of the day, I mean, I'm proud of myself and who I am. And I don't know if you even knew this, but last year I had a really, really major spine surgery, like really major. I had a 2-level lumbar fusion with a discectomy. It was really bad. Like, it was.
you don't move like you had a fusion.
I'm not even 6 months. I'll be 6 months on the 10th out. So like, I'm still very early in the recovery process still.
So what numbers were fused?
L4, 5, and then 5, 1.
So
Or 5, L5, L4 and 5, then L5, S1. So from 4 to S1 in my lumbar. So basically from like the middle of my back all the way down, essentially, is all.
Yeah, like to the hip, basically the hip area.
Yeah, beyond the hip, actually. It goes all the way down to your tailbone. So
That's
my
right.
incision starts up right like 2 inches, well, maybe not even 2 inches, about an inch below my rib cage. So honestly, it was a really humbling year of like, this is where I'm at. That's why, in fact, one of the videos you showed where I was talking about like learning my limits, accepting what I can and can't do. And even when it comes to physically, like I saw a lot of things change physically with last year. And I'd had chronic back issues for like 20 years, but I really slowed down at the beginning of last year and physically could not do a lot of what I was doing. And I really paid for it, and my family paid for it because I was trying so hard to keep up with work. And then, you only have so much you can give, and when your body is kind of quitting on you a little bit, you're kind of pulling from an empty cup. And it was, you know, I could say so much that like I gained weight and I'm not as in shape, and I'm still like don't have the endurance I did a year ago. But at flip side, like I could have been paralyzed. So I feel like you have to really keep it into perspective in like what matters and what's important, because in the grand scheme of things, the fact that I can walk and am still doing what I love is such a gift. I'm just going to focus on all the good parts, and I'm not going to worry about little stuff,
And you don't look like you've had back surgery. I mean, are you
it was bad.
You're in Texas, the state of Texas?
Yeah, I live a little north of Houston.
Okay.
I'm born and raised, so I'm rocking it out.
There's a famous
Texas folks.
Texas guy. He was my idol as far as bodybuilding, Ronnie Coleman.
Okay, yeah.
He is from Texas. He had, I want to say at least, I don't know how, he's had 30 plus surgeries after he retired. After he retired from bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And I think almost his entire back is all fused. I don't think he has yeah. And he's still working out.
I think that's incredible. Honestly, like so to back up a little bit, I woke up one day last year. I had a lot of back issues. They were getting worse and worse. I saw a chiropractor. I did PT. Obviously, I was physically active. I was physically fit. I was as healthy as I could be. In fact, that was one of the things that saved me from having surgery quicker. But I have degenerative disc disease. So my two bottom discs were just gone. There was just nothing there. And they herniated out, blocking my spinal cord, and had affected the nerve roots. The bones had grown. It was really bad. I mean, the whole thing it was just a really significant, they were like, I don't know how you're walking. I woke up one day and I just had lost feeling in the right side of my leg, just completely. I couldn't feel from my hip all the way down to my toes. And it terrified me. I waited a couple weeks to go to the doctor because I kept thinking, surely I just moved wrong or something's pinched. I'd had the pinched nerves before. So I was like, this is going to go away. And it didn't. And I saw 8 surgeons because I was in such denial that this was the only option I had. And it was just it is what it is. I just didn't get another. It was the best opportunity to preserve as much as I could physically. And I think at some point I just had to accept it. And it was hard. I mean, like I said, that started in April and I didn't have surgery till August. So, I mean, the medical industry has changed so much. It was a process to get it in and get scheduled. And I mean, insurance approvals. I mean, this was a $500,000 surgery. This is
Thank God
insane.
For insurance.
I know. I have great insurance right now too because of the show. I had my SAG insurance, which was amazing. But yeah, I mean, I think the last I checked, it was actually closer to like $650 for the surgery. I mean, and
we can go on that hole really deep because that's everybody connected to the medical industry that wants to get a piece of that pie. That's why it's so expensive.
It's so twisted. It's funny. My family has worked in insurance, and so I see it. I saw it from a certain angle for a lot of years because, of course, I mean, there's a point where you're like, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm hearing, and I had a lot of big opinions. But I would say that over like the last, I think especially with Ben when he was first diagnosed, like that changed everything about how I viewed everything. Just the arguing about approvals and what was he eligible for, and I'm like, I don't understand. This is the only treatment. I can't even. I spent so many hours arguing with insurance over those early years that it's just, it was so disheartening. It was such a experience. And so now I'm like jaded, right? Where I'm like, I know that it's twisted and I don't understand how like they bill out $600K and then the insurance, like right off the top, half of it goes away. And then it's somebody called it insurance accounting. And I was like, that's the best. That's exactly how I would call it. Like that, only they could call it that.
Well,
weird.
My mom was, when I was a kid, my mom was in the medical industry on the business end of it.
Yeah.
It's funny because my wife, man, when she has time, I'll have her meet you. But So
Yeah, I love that.
our youngest son, I'm trying to get my wife's attention. So Gideon has what sensory what
Sensory processing disorder.
he
Oh
has
yeah,
a sensory processing disorder. So very similar. We had to do
sure.
speech therapy when he was he was obviously very verbal. He's very verbal. Trust me, he will.
Right.
He's very physical too.
I love that.
So he needs that touch, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
funny thing is, um, because he needs to touch and be active and do things. If we tell him to clean, he can't resist it because he wants to get his hands involved.
Oh, I
But
love that.
but
That's
he
amazing.
but he hates cleaning. So just that's the funniest thing. Because he's a germaphobe. He can't
Okay.
stand
Okay.
germs. But when he sees stuff like he's like it's like an internal struggle for him. Like and my wife and I were laughing the other day
Oh.
because he was cleaning our bathroom and he was cleaning it so terrible. But he was in his mind he was working hard.
Sure, of
Yeah,
course. Yeah.
yeah.
Which is kids. The best part of kids is their innocence. And you're just like, please just keep going. Like I'm gonna say nothing. And that's hard, I think, as a parent, right? Because if you're like, I'm sort of type A and I want things done a certain way, my poor husband has to deal with it too. Because I'm like, don't say anything. And he can tell that I'm like, I'm trying not to be critical. And it's definitely something you learn. We've been together 25 years almost. So it's like it really takes working through like I need to not say this. This is not worth saying. Be cool, be cool. And he sees it and he's like, what am I doing wrong? And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please just do it this way. And he's like, okay, fine. Which is good.
But with I agree with you with the whole medical aspect because
Yeah.
everybody has to get their piece of the pie. When they see a big
Yeah.
ticket item, they're going, "Oh, wait, hold on, let's get approval." It's like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Well, and what's crazy is like here's a fascinating thing, right? So I have titanium discs, right? So I have spacers that are in my spine now that are titanium, and then I have two rods and six screws, right? And that alone was like $80,000. And you're like, you, me, and the trees know how much titanium makes. And of course, this person needs to make money. Everybody's here for that. But it does seem like, and maybe it's just me, and maybe it's just, I think, me being kind of glib with seeing so much over the last few years. And especially with my son, like, so he has autism. That's part of it, right? But he also has an immune disorder that caused epilepsy, right? So there's a lot there, and we've seen a lot of specialists over the years, infectious disease, and this. I mean, it took years to get to where he is now, where he's physically as healthy as he is. But you start to really get that, like, at the end of the day, they're not going to make money if people aren't
sick.
needing their service. Yeah, it's horrible to say that. Like, you don't want to believe it, but it's true. I mean, it's a really frustrating aspect of it because you're like, by that same extension, they also know that if something they don't want to pay for, like not everybody is going to spend the time to fight it. And
Yeah,
that's so frustrating too. Because like even with the surgery, they were more than happy to cover that surgery because it meant that basically in theory, while you may have to have another surgery, odds are your insurance will have changed and it won't be their problem. But not only that, like if you do one of the less invasive surgeries, which again, I wasn't a candidate for, that you needed approval for because in their mind, they could, like, even if you had that done, odds are it wasn't going to solve the problem and that you would be back doing something else in 6 months or a year. Like, that is so crazy to me that, like, I mean, how is a surgery that's $100,000 harder to approve than $500,000? Like, what? I mean, I don't
at
get
that
it.
it's about residual income too because obviously
Totally.
it's not just the surgery. You
Yeah.
got post op, you have follow up visits,
Yes.
you got to get medication for pain, right,
Yeah.
for the next 6 months.
Pre-op.
Which is a totally different deal now, by the way. I will be super honest that the way, and I this is such a controversial topic, and so I shouldn't say anything, but I feel like it's such a, you talk about like
Let's
pain
do
meds,
it.
right? I was so surprised by what their expectations were in terms of like pain management post a surgery like this. When I tell you that, like, I woke up screaming, like there was no other way to put it. And I'm not embarrassed by that. I was in the hospital for 2 days. It was horribly, the pain was like, I mean, just my poor husband was like, I can't even see you like this. Like this, it killed him. He was like, this is the worst. That first 10 days was, oh my gosh. But like, they send you home with meds and they're like, well, take it every 6 hours. And you're like, okay. And it's not, it doesn't, it barely touches it, barely touched it. And it was like, okay, well, we don't want, we won't prescribe stronger stuff because it's addictive, right? But it's addictive if you're taking it for reasons like this was a surgery. This was a very valid use of like that. That's what that medication was designed for. And so I obviously see the need for like preventing and listen, the pharmaceutical industry made a lot of money off of a lot of people's misfortune. So I totally am like 100% something needed to happen. But it's so crazy that like doctors are scared to prescribe adequate pain meds after something that intense. Like that is literally known as like one of the top 5 most painful surgeries you can have. So it was very like I was very frustrated by it. I found it to be very frustrating. And like then the pharmacy is questioning you and I'm like, I've literally been going to this pharmacy for 10 years. You have never asked me a question about anything else. Like, I mean, I don't know. It was a very odd experience, you know. I mean, I got through it. I'm glad that I'm past it. I'm not on pain meds now, obviously, but it was, yeah. I mean, it was a fight every day. It was horrible.
So
Horrible.
all the pain and surgeries behind, you've created some
Yep.
pretty amazing work
Thank
after
you.
that. And I think you said the word commission pieces. Can you explain to us what that means to
Sure.
people?
Yeah, so commission pieces are like when somebody would reach out to me and say like, "Hey, I want this custom, piece for this space in my house and I need it to function this way or I want a dining room table or I want a built-in cabinet for my dining room or whatever." So I've done like I haven't restarted commission pieces since I had surgery because I wanted to make sure I was 100%. But I actually just started a build for myself, a personal build. And honestly, it's been one that I sketched out actually post surgery. So, which was such a cool thing about that, and that I spent a lot of time sketching and kind of really going back. I missed it so much, like being out here. So it was in that way like a good opportunity to kind of refresh my creative energy, I guess. Because when you're in it day to day, it's hard to appreciate it to a point, right? And so stepping back, I think in that regard was very healthy. But yeah, so I just started this new build, and I'm like, okay, once this one's done, then I'll be able to resume that. But yeah, I've done a bunch of cool commission builds over the years that are amazing. In fact, my American flags are still one of the most popular builds that people
Explain that.
request.
Explain that American flag ones.
So I've made custom American flags that are literally out of all hardwood. So they don't, they're not red, white, and blue. They're very like kind of muted tones. I use walnut to replace the blue backer, and then I'll actually cut maple on my laser for all of the stars. And then I usually do maple and cherry, or maple and mahogany, or maple and sapele, or like, there's a handful of different species you can kind of interchange, or ash for maple. But they're just these really amazing pieces of artwork that end up being one of the things people request all the time, that they're like, can you make these flags, or I need it for an office or a school, or I mean there's always really cool stories behind it too. Or I had a friend, whose son was a veteran and he's coming home. There was always cool stories behind everyone, which I don't know, felt like a big gift of it. You want to feel like there's something very cool about knowing whether it's, like I said, a flag, or whether it's a custom build, like that something you create and make is going to be in somebody's everyday life. Like that's very humbling when you think about it like that, because you're like, all of these people will have all of these memories associated with your Thanksgiving table, right? Or you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
so much sentiment there, and I really get a lot of satisfaction walking through my house and being like, I built this and I built that, and I don't know, there's something cool about that. But anytime you get to do something that's extra sentimental, and obviously I'm a really patriotic person, I think that's a Texas thing a little bit. But you know, being able to express love for our country and appreciation, especially for what so many have sacrificed for it, is such a cool full circle thing too. It's a gift to do it.
Well, and the fact that you're working with your hands
Yeah.
and you're building stuff. One of my previous guests, David Padilla, he's a very good friend of mine actually in Hawaii. I took my pistol safety courses from him,
Okay.
from his company. He mentioned a comment. We were talking about money, and he said that
Sure.
with Elon Musk, he said with all his money, it's good to see that he's still creating stuff,
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
innovation, whatever. And so I think that's really cool what you do. And now you mentioned a word, sapele. Is that an African wood?
Sapele is actually a domestic wood. It's
Okay.
very close to, I've got a piece of it right here. It's very close to um, mahogany in that it's got these really pretty, see if I can pull this down. It's
So
got these really
it's a
pretty
hardwood.
stripes. It's a hardwood, but it's a really like stunning wood because it shimmers, right? Like it's got these like
Oh,
it's so hard to explain, but if you've ever seen mahogany when it's really well finished and really done right, it gets these like stripes of like sheen, and you're like, this
okay.
is so incredible.
Okay. Let me
Sapele's
flex.
like that.
I'm gonna flex on you now.
Okay, I'm ready for it.
So this
Oh,
it, so this was my office for many years. So
okay,
when I say office, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I sat at a desk." No, I actually did woodworking, sanding,
it's
woodworking,
amazing.
refinishing.
Okay,
So my boss was Angus Mitchell. Rest in peace. He actually just passed away in January.
I'm
He was only
sorry.
53, but his
Wow,
dad built this house in 1987,
jeez.
and we remodeled this floor. So the floor is actually ipe, which is
Okay,
a Brazil, I think Brazilian wood,
yes, yes,
and we had it shipped, and we had to let it sit they let it sit at the warehouse for I think a year.
sure, yeah.
But even then, we're in Hawaii, so it was still at like 30%, I think, moisture.
Okay,
So it was still quite a bit, and I think we had to bring it down to like I want to say 12. I forget the number, like 12% before we started to work with it.
yeah.
But
You generally, if it's air dried, 12 is probably pretty good.
yeah, so I know we're throwing some specs out there because I'm flexing people. So, but
I love that.
all the cabinets and doors are coil wood.
Okay, okay. So that was so koa is similar to a walnut, right? It's a very
Yeah,
similar
it's like
species.
acacia is the actual English,
Okay.
but in Hawaii, when they brought the acacia over, it took upon the character of the soil. And
So
so
beautiful.
when you said shimmer,
Yes.
coil wood has a golden shimmer when you sand it
Oh,
down properly. I think
right.
at least like 300 or higher, and
Okay.
you oil it multiple times, it has a beautiful shimmer.
I feel
It's
like that's what's cool with wood too is it's like nature is it's nature's art in the best
yeah.
way, right? Because you're like, how did anything that just grew in the soil like create it's so beautiful. And I'm such a nerd by that, right? Like I get so excited when I see a cool piece of wood and like you get to experience that. But I mean that's absolutely stunning.
Now you
It's
can't see the island, but that island costed 30 grand.
oh,
That cabinet guy charged way too much, but
custom
it's
cabinets are expensive and they're tedious. So now
yeah.
that's beautiful.
So this is what we call the main house. So if you notice the beam at the top, the white
Sure.
portion of it,
Right?
that's not wood. That's actually concrete.
Okay.
So the beams or the posts are not supportive. They're just cosmetic. And
Okay, that's interesting.
yeah, they're actually tree stumps, and they're pretty big. It's hard to tell in a photo, but the entire house is kind of built like the interior of a turtle shell. That's what
Oh,
it
that's
represents.
cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I saw the curves and I was like, that's really cool because there's curves everywhere, which is pretty neat.
But this is I don't think there's any hard corners on this house. Everything
Love
is
that.
rounded, yeah, which obviously took a lot of time and money.
No kidding.
The picture on the left, I worked on those quite a bit. We had to take those out and really preserve those. Those are made out of monkey pod.
Okay. So monkey pod's beautiful too. That's amazing
It
pieces
is.
of wood. That's actually a pretty common imported wood. That's from, I want to say it's from Brazil or Costa Rica is where monkey pod comes
Yeah,
from the most.
it does
Um,
well in those type of climates. Yeah.
Beautiful though. I mean, those stairs are
Well,
absolutely stunning.
so this was designed in the 80s. So the guy, I can't remember his name, is a very famous designer and architect. He designed those steps. It's so funny. He designed them to have a tone.
Okay.
So I don't know how there's some science to it. So every time you step on one, it makes a tone. So he made it like a bongo or congas.
Okay.
So when you step on it, it goes dum 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 dum. So you
That's
literally,
amazing.
yeah,
I
and
mean,
yeah,
like I would have never thought to do like honestly, I feel like I need to try to do this now. I need to look into how to do that because I feel like I'm missing out, like not having a
Well,
like a
I
song when I walk
I
up my
think the
stairs.
secret is the obviously the design of the wood,
Sure.
but also the acousticness underneath. So
Yeah.
there's a chamber underneath too.
That's so
It-
incredible. I
yeah.
mean, how create like that's I mean, what a amazing you're like obviously aesthetically it's stunning. Now that's beautiful too. Yeah, that's incredible.
So this is mango wood.
Okay.
I don't personally like mango wood, but it's still nice. It's a trop, and this came from the property. This we had to cure for I think 6 months, and it was still warping. So
Oh, okay.
and it did split in some areas, and we just filled it with epoxy and
You got to love epoxy for that, right? Epoxy
yeah,
fixes most everything.
we trust me, bro. When your property is on the ocean, you're gonna have to learn how to use epoxy.
Yeah. I mean, where I'm at, we're on like former wetlands, right? So we have humidity year round. I mean, it's almost 100% humidity 12 months of the year. So I definitely relate to you on that because it's like there's no way to escape. You just have
The
to kind of do the
moisture.
best you can. Yeah. I mean, and if you have to be smart about it and compensate. Now, I mean, say, I think that's beautiful.
So yeah, with the oil, we use teak oil, so
Yeah.
that's the
Okay.
finish. But yeah,
Yeah. That's stunning.
so on wetlands, do you have like streams running through your property or close
So
to it?
we're on 3 acres. We have culverts. We have several French drains that drain out. But no, we don't have streams per se. Now, bordering our property is a drainage easement. So obviously, a lot of this has been built out. Where I'm at, I live in a small neighborhood that's only got like 30 or 35 homes. But we're close to a national forest, and so a lot of the water sort of it's kind of like it's not so much streams or lakes. It's just wet. Everything is wet. So we have like concrete foundations, which I don't know what y'all have in Hawaii because y'all have a lot of elevation changes too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you're in Oregon now, so you probably are dealing with a totally different structure.
I live in the desert. Like, oh my gosh.
Oh, okay. I thought you were in Oregon for some reason.
No, no. So there's
Oh, okay.
we're in a high desert, and so my all my instruments that I shipped over, they're
Okay.
starting to dry out. So I got to figure out how to bring the moisture
Yeah.
back in.
See, that would work. That makes sense. I mean, I can see where that would be an issue. It's funny though, because like because of how humid it is, and so all of my wood I keep on this side of the shop because it's climate controlled. I have a small mini split out here. And this portion of the shop I actually built myself. So it was a slab when we bought the house, and I did everything but the framing. So it's in the roof actually, so which is really cool because it was months of my life, but it was such a dream of mine to do it. I think again inspired sort of by my dad building an addition when I was a kid, and I was like, I want to do this, right? I want to do it, and so I did. So that was really cool. But it's anyway, whenever you bring furniture inside, you have to be so cautious of it, right? Because you
Mhm.
have to regulate this wood versus what's indoors. And we actually switched out like our HVAC system like a couple years ago. And now that like the higher rated systems, they dehumidify a lot better, right? And so we even noticed a change just from that. Like how in if it's outside, the humidity is, 100%. Go inside, it's like 40%. And that's really low. Like it's funny how that stuff like impacts wood and there is a lot to be said for oftentimes like especially here when I build something I will often recommend that a piece sit and then I'll finish on site after it's sat in a place for a couple of days to give it a chance to chill because if there's an issue it's better to fix it before you've applied finish.
Do you have your own
Thankfully.
like um uh, in Hawaii we had this we created our own oven. I guess you call it an oven where we'd run heat through it and we put the boards in it.
Oh,
And
okay.
it kind of sped up the process, but some you just got to be careful because we'd have to clamp it down to where
Yeah,
it wouldn't twist. So
right.
do you have anything that you do that with, or you just let it cure naturally?
So I don't have a kiln. Most of the wood I purchase is kiln dried already.
Okay.
So once it's been dried, yeah, you don't really have to do too much to it unless it's outside for some reason. Now, if it's in the rain or if I like was going to take one of our oak trees, that I would have to let sit for probably a couple of years here. But yeah, if you do that, yeah, if you air dry it, it can take years to dry
Yeah.
out fully. I mean, a long time. And if you do rush it, especially if it's partially dried and if it's wet on the core, it can warp really bad. I don't think people really understand. There's like a science to making wood usable from a tree stump, you know? So it's kind of crazy that way when you think about it, because there's a lot of technology that goes into that. And funny, a friend of mine owns his own milling. So he will go and, like, say you have a tree on your property that you want taken down. And he's local to Houston, which is cool. He'll go and take it, cut it down, bring it back to his shop, mill it, and then he dries it and sells it, you know, or dries it and he's commissioned to build something from it for the resident. You know, maybe it was a tree that was sentimental. So that's always kind of cool too, because it's a way to really make it sustainable, which is neat.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of people, if they have trees that need to be cut down, they cut them down and they mulch it and call it a day. They never mess with it. You know, just kind of sad. It's
Yeah.
wasted, you know.
Save it, use it for something.
Totally. I mean, even if
Yeah.
you're just using it for firewood, don't throw it away. Like, I don't know. Call me crazy. I guess mulch is needed too. That's fair, I guess, but still.
So I seen in one of the videos, do you have a planer? Is that what you have in one of those videos?
Which video was
I
it?
don't know if it's
I have a plane. I have a big planer. Actually, I have a 20-inch helical head. That's an incredible. It's a 5 horsepower planer, and it's was one of those really big investments that I made, and I love that thing so much. It's so incredible if you're running bigger boards or if you really
Yeah.
need to like take quite a bit of meat off it. Now I've had several straight knife planers that were smaller. Like I had my 13-inch DeWalt that I used for years and loved that one. And then I have one from Ryobi. I've used one from Rigid before. I've had a bunch of, I mean, honestly, I've had a bunch of planers over my lifetime. But no, now I have the big one.
So we'll talk. I probably pulled the trigger early on that, but let's talk tools in a second. But before we
Sure.
get into tools, you talked about designing a piece.
Yeah.
How do you start designing? Are you on a computer? Do you get a napkin and start drawing it out? How do you start, or is it all of the above? How does it work for you designing a piece?
It's funny. I am one of the most old school people. I have tried 3D modeling software. I find it very tedious. I wish I was like had the patience to do it, but I'm better at building, right? So I will sketch out. I do a lot of art too, to be honest. Like I do a lot of painting and coloring and a lot of I really, especially like recovering, not being able out here to create the art that I do with wood, I needed an extra outlet that was creative. But I have sketchbooks, just a stack. I mean, probably 30 of them that are just sketches of work that I either have built or want to build at some point. Just ideas that I'm like, this pattern would be really cool, or this species would be really cool. Like for this piece that I'm working on right now, it's going to be a really neat coffee bar that's got a built-in with drawers and water. It's going to be kind of confusing, but like it'll have my coffee set up, but it'll also have all of like the tea bags, coffee, etc. Then I'll have like a 5-gallon jug to feed water into it because I like things to be easy too. Anyway, so that the piece itself is going to be a really big, massive piece. So I always sketch out aesthetically what I hope it looks like in a space. And then I'm a big functional person. So I always say like function has to come in. Function before aesthetics, really, right? So I want it to look good, but it needs to serve whatever purpose it needs to serve. Otherwise, I feel like it ends up being disposable, because if you're basing your furniture on trends, right, eventually that trend is going to go out and something else is going to come in. So when I design, I really try to hone into like what is needed, what is the problem we're trying to solve, where is it located? It has to be practical. And then, you know, I'll focus on from there, making it pretty, you know? So yeah, I sketch out. I'm so old school.
So there's a reference. I don't know if I can tie this. I don't know if I can connect this dot to what you're talking about, but my friend who is a police officer, he teaches firearms. He says, you're responsible for every bullet that leaves your gun. And
Yeah.
when it comes to your projects, everything that you've created, even pieces that you don't sell or give away, are you attached to anything that, like, let's say you created something, maybe it wasn't perfect. Are there any pieces that you have that are special to you that you're never going to sell, you're never going to give out to anybody?
You know, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm trying to think. So in fact, a lot of experimenting that I've done over the years, and I think that's part of, in this case, how you educate yourself a little bit. So much of what I'm doing, I'm not formally trained, right? Like there's no school. I mean, there's schools for woodworking, but they're usually like hyper focused. But I never went to like, there's no college, right? Like there's no 5 years of education for woodworking. A lot of it is, at least in my case, not to speak for others, but a lot of it is you learn from others. In my case, I learned from my dad. I learned from seeking out information, and I learned from trial and error. So like, especially when I first started working with epoxy, I was really interested in creating like faux marble, right? I love the idea of being able to say,
Mhm.
imagine on a big scale, like you have a dining table or a coffee table, and you have beautiful walnut, and then it looks like as if the marble and the walnut are one piece, right? Like, so it's hard to explain, but like in aesthetically, like that's such a cool idea of like soft and hard, and of wood, which is so organic and natural, to like stone. That transition is really cool. So I played around a lot with recreating that stuff. Some of those pieces aren't ever designed to be sold. They're just part of experimenting. But I wanted to finish them because I wanted it to look good, you
So,
know.
so it's kind of like your education, basically.
Yeah, I think you learn from every one of those things. Another one was, in fact, this is one of the first projects I did after surgery. I really wanted to work with crayon and epoxy, right? And people have done them melting,
Oh,
whatever. I was like,
yeah.
yeah, this is cool, but I wanted to do something like different. So I sat there shaving crayons so that it made like powder. Okay. Like, I know it sounds weird. And then I did another thing with epoxy, and it was a quote that says, even broken crayons still color, right? So the goal being that, like, you're going to face obstacles in life. Things are going to step in your way. Things are going to fail. Things are going to be different. You're going to maybe be outside of the society mold, or you're not going to fit in a box that somebody wants you to fit in. Like, just because you're not perfect based on somebody else's standard or even your own standards doesn't mean that you're not capable of doing cool things, or like that you're not functional, or that you're not worthy or good, right? And I feel like that's such a powerful message in my own mind. So it felt like such a cool project. That one meant a lot. That's something I'll keep forever. Like, I can't imagine, it's in my house. I can't imagine it not
So
being
you
used.
shaved the crayons. Did you
Yeah.
mix it with the epoxy, or you dropped it in the epoxy after it was set, or how did that look?
So it was cool. I put a small layer of epoxy in the bottom. I carved out that quote within a piece of walnut. I'll send you a picture of it. It's really
Okay,
cool. I carved a piece of walnut out, and carved this quote, and then I put a little bit of epoxy to create like a foundation for it to stick to, and
right.
then I shaved the crayons into it because I wanted to also look not unique color, right? Because if you mix it in, then it has a tendency to like not be well distributed,
Yeah,
and so I wanted it to look as if all these colors matched together on each letter, and
that's
so
cool.
it was really, honestly, like, I want to do it on a bigger scale. I think it's such a cool project. I That's going to be on my list of things when I have time to like just create for creating's sake. That'll be another one I want to do. And then I sealed it with epoxy over so that the wax, was encapsulated basically. But it was such a fun project. And it was something that I'd always wanted to do. And so I was like, I'm doing this post surgery. Like, I'm going to do this. This is on my list.
I love working with epoxy. I just wish it wasn't
Yeah,
so expensive. Like, just for
it
like a
is.
half gallon, the one that I used was like $800 for a gallon.
Oh,
And no,
oh my gosh.
a gallon was 800. And the company is I think it's Ecopoxy.
Okay, so ecopoxy, yeah, they're a little pricey. They're good. I mean, it's good stuff. I've had a lot of people have
Yeah.
had great luck with it. I personally have always used Total Boat. And and they actually, it's funny, they really got their start in epoxy because they catered towards boat refinishers. Like, that was
Yeah.
really
That's
what they
why
started
Hawaii,
with.
yeah, we love that in Hawaii because it'll
Yeah.
work. It'll last.
Yeah, it's a really cool. It's a neat product. But so I've worked with them over the years, which is really great. And so they'll send me new product and stuff to try out. But I feel like a gallon of it. I'd have to look. I want to say it's like 125 or
I might
so.
I might be quoting a different company price, but I know just
Okay,
in general in the
it is.
islands,
Regardless, it's expensive. I mean,
yeah.
it's you know
I,
no
I
matter how
would
you slice it.
I would cut out, I think it's dowels like in wood, and I would mix different colors to see what they look like and let
Yeah.
it dry, and I would have like a little palette, and then I would pick.
Oh, I
And
love that.
the powder is not cheap either. So mixing the powder,
Yeah, the pigments.
the pigment, yeah, yeah.
It's funny. I'm laughing at I have a whole display of pigments up here.
You do.
Uh, yeah, and so it's funny, if you ever get into it again, there's newer pigments that have come out that are liquid pigments. Mixol makes one, but actually you can mix that pigment and other stuff, which is really neat. You can make like custom paint colors or cement colors and stuff. But Total Boat, they also have dispersion pigments that make it like the most opaque color you've ever seen in your life. So it's not shimmery, right? They're like true to color. It's really neat to experiment too, or combining the two with them. Or if you've ever done alcohol inks and epoxy,
I
that's,
haven't done alcohol inks now.
oh my gosh, it's so fun. It makes like these starburst effects. It's just it's such a fun, no two ways about it. It's
Okay,
fun. Like,
wait. So
yeah.
the alcohol, it
Yes,
reacts to whatever. Is that why it does that starburst? Because it's reacting like
yes.
how water and oil kind of a deal?
So it's similar, right? So they obviously epoxy, when you mix the two portions together, creates a exothermic reaction that actually solidifies eventually with time, right? So as that heat, it creates heat within that container, and then as that heat
Yeah, yeah.
dissipates, it'll cool into a solid, like, almost plastic-like form. But whenever the alcohol ink hits it, in fact, one of the ways you can get rid of bubbles on epoxy is to spray it with higher 91 or 94%
I didn't
alcohol.
think about that. We always had a heat gun.
It's a yeah. So heat guns work, but I will say you have to be careful with fumes from the heat gun on epoxy. You always got to be watch that.
Oh,
But I do them. You use it. I mean, it's part of it. You just have to be mindful of it. I'm sensitive though to smells.
I thought it
So
smells good, honestly.
that's funny.
Yeah,
There are a lot of weird smells. Like I'm one of those that likes the smell of cut grass and like gasoline.
yeah.
So I'm with you on like I like the oddest scents. But no, alcohol ink as it suspends, right? It because alcohol is such a different viscosity, it'll literally freeze within the pigment. But it also, because it evaporates so quickly, it'll evaporate out of the epoxy you have to do it while it's curing, so it needs to still be liquid, right? It'll leave the pigment, but the alcohol will evaporate. It's just such a neat, and you can layer it to create all these cool effects. It's such a fun. That's an addicting process, honestly. Like it's a really fun experience to do that. Like,
I don't think I've seen any videos on your social. Have you done any videos on that?
not recently. I have, but it's been
Oh,
a while. I'm trying to think. In fact, I used epoxy yesterday, so it's funny because I walked by it today and I like put my finger in it. I was like, wow, Sarah, like you didn't know how long it needed to cure. Like
oh, it,
I'm
it was so
I'm
sticky.
clearly yeah, I'm just like a 5-year-old in an adult body. Couldn't resist. But yeah, so I do quite a bit of epoxy work, but it's not as artistic anymore. But I need to change that. I feel like that needs to be. I'll have to bring some of that back. In fact, my daughter and I did some with alcohol ink for Christmas ornaments. So one of the traditions I have every year is that my kids and I will make handmade Christmas ornaments, right? We've done like dough ones, we've done ones out of wood that we like, encased in glitter. We did this one cool one that was it was an ornament with water beads, right? That
Yeah.
were clear. And so you could suspend like solid things. And so I cut a bunch of acrylic on my glow forge of like different shapes, like trees and fun stuff. And you could suspend it and fill it with water and it would look like a snow globe, right? Because everything was just floating and the Orbeez or the water beads would disappear. So that one, it's hard to explain, but it was a really fun project with them. But this year we did epoxy ones because they're a little older and they wanted to, which was a mess, by the way. No matter how old your kids are, I was like, why did I think this? I must have questioned my entire life in every moment of that day. But that one was really fun because we played around with alcohol inks and the kids got such a kick out of it. But, I don't share a ton of content with my kids. Like they help me in the shop all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're going to be in the background and I can't stop that really. Like, or I choose to like let some of it go. But I've had a lot of people like steal my photos of my kids pretending they're theirs. And that really freaks you out. So I got to be very protective about that. Very careful.
You know what? Let's go there because
Sad.
I used to not ever show my kids
Yeah.
because my social media in the beginning it really started with live streaming. That's where I really got it.
Sure.
I didn't mess around with photos. I went straight to live video, and there
Love
are a
that.
lot of rules that I had to form for myself in the beginning. I never showed
Yeah.
like anything in my home that was expensive because my GPS was always on. So I didn't
Yeah.
want
I mean,
people.
smart.
Yeah,
It's
I didn't want
sad.
people. I didn't want people coming in to like rip us off, right?
Right.
I didn't show my kids very deliberately for a while, and then after a while, it just inadvertently run around. My son, I can't tell him don't give me a
Yeah.
hug,
Right.
So and
It's
yeah,
it's tough to find the right limits with that because I've had periods where if they're in the picture or the background, even like a glimpse of like a photo of the photo, if you will, I would like not post it And then I realized that I was keeping, let's see how to say this. They're owed every ounce of privacy, right?
Yeah,
100%.
true.
Especially with my son's situation, I even more so felt like I owed it to him out of respect for his complexities of his situation to always be very guarded what I said and what I didn't say. And I feel like I'm an open person, but I also, I want to respect boundaries, right? But I think it's tough because you can't keep part of it locked in, right? And so this past summer I went through a phase where I felt like I think so overwhelmed from trying to keep things separate and that I wasn't really being authentic
Yeah.
by it, if that makes sense. Like, so I think there's a balance, right? Like I would never use my kids in an ad, for example,
Yeah.
ever. I would never, use them for, let's say, engagement or whatever. I've certainly included photos or pictures where like I've said it's such a great gift to like be able to teach your kids things or whatever. And I love when my kids work with me in the shop. But I'm even then it's few and far between because it is like separate life, And to be honest, I mean, not sure how you've ever considered this, but I have a predominantly male audience. Like my Instagram, I think it's like 80% male. So as much as I hate saying it, I fought so hard to gain respect as a woman in the trades in general
I
that
believe it.
it's tough. Even it's 2024 and the comments. Oh my God. Facebook is the worst for the ugly comments, by the way. That's the worst platform for like ridiculous comments where I'm like I had somebody tell me once, this is why feminism doesn't work. I was like, okay. And I'm
See,
like,
that's why I have you, because I can imagine the comment. I'm thinking of it right
oh,
now. I'm thinking like, oh wow, I didn't know a woman could do this, or wow, your husband lets you play with his tools.
I've
Yeah.
heard, I literally, I've heard it all. In fact, I had somebody once, and this happened recently, and my dad saw it, and he called me. He's like, "Don't let that blah blah blah," use some colorful language, get you down. He doesn't know anything. He was like, the guy said though, he was like, "So nice of your dad to let you borrow his tools," and my dad was like, "He doesn't know anything," and I was like, "Dad, it's you can't like there is so much that you can't control," and like I've heard recently, I heard this where somebody said create content for the people that are watching your content and that are engaging and like let it go a little bit, right? Like you can't, the people that don't believe women belong in that industry or don't believe in me as a person or don't believe in my skills, I could I could bang my head against the wall trying to convince them of that and I'm never going to win. So like
I'll tell you this. Let
let
me
it
share.
go.
I'll share this with you. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you know who he is, Mike Rowe. The
Yeah.
he and this is I think last year or a couple years ago. He said that there is an epidemic of men
Yeah.
not working, and he said there are 7 million men right now that are unemployed. And he says, I'm going to throw a fake number, but like 80% of them are not working because they don't want to.
Yeah, see that's
And,
sad.
and the other 20% are because they just can't find a job that would best suit their needs or family.
Right.
And he says, I tour the nation doing all these dirty jobs that pay decent amount of money. And I'm learning all these different trades that are looking for workers.
Right.
And there's an epidemic of men that are sitting at home being a cell phone entrepreneur, pretending that they have a business or a product, trying to push it on people for whatever reason.
Right.
And the fact that you're working with your hands, you are in a profession that the 80% can do and are not willing to do.
And they choose not to.
Yeah. So
It's,
sexism aside, chauvinism, whatever.
yeah.
But you just keep flexing on them.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Keep flexing on them.
I always am curious, obviously so much of what you're doing now in terms of talking about the struggles of like, we look at like unemployment numbers. In fact, they were just released last week and people are like, oh, so-and-so, they're unemployed. And I'm like, it's such an odd thing because you're like, how is unemployment going down? But like, I know being in this industry, one of the things we talk about constantly, in fact, I'm working on a really amazing campaign with a really major big box store. I can't say because I don't know if it's in my NDA that I'm allowed to say it or not.
Yeah.
Now that I was like, let me hold on. I have to make sure I'm careful. That is literally talking about their promoting trades, right? As like, this is a viable career. obviously there's a lot of misconceptions. I think you could look at a lot of things over the last few generations where my dad and I used to talk about this all the time. He was definitely a trades guy, but he was told you go to college, right? Like that was the attitude then. Like go to college, don't do this, don't do that. When the reality is, without the electricians, without the plumbers, without the mechanics, you're not driving your car, or you're not living with air conditioning, and you don't have lights on in your house. So like those are the people that built America, and they're the people that keep America going. But there's this odd stigma around it. And I still feel like that is present to a point, which is crazy to me because I feel like education is amazing. I am a big nerd. I joke that I'm a forever student. I think I told you that's one of the things
Yeah.
I call myself, right? Is and I truly am. I've always had great academic success. Like when my son early in his diagnosis, perfect example, I went back to school because I wasn't getting the answers I wanted from his doctors. And I felt like I was getting part of the story, but not all of it. I was studying neuroengineering. I was desperate to like figure this out. Now it wasn't my calling, right? And I realized it was taking a lot away from my family that I had to reassess where my priorities were. And it wasn't what I wasn't getting, it didn't hit all of my boxes, right? But I think you should do what your family needs to make things happen, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's nothing wrong with pivoting in your life if you're in a career that you're not happy with, pivot, right? Don't quit. Don't quit working in general. Like what an odd thing to do that. And I think there is something to be said for, you know, I think there's dead industries, right? Where people aren't showing their kids or their families, or it's not being passed down the way it was, say, 100 years ago anymore. And I think that I have to assume that's part of it. Because I think people inherently, I can't be just me, want to fix. They want, there's a huge portion of people who are mechanically inclined or, enjoy working with their hands, but they've been told for so long that that's not what they need to be doing or should be doing. That's not the right thing, that I feel like there's now like a internal struggle of like, what's next? How do you overcome, those obstacles? And I don't know the answer for that, but I will say that it is odd to me to just know how many people, I think there's a lack of understanding of how these fields are. I mean, what's going to happen? What are we going to do in 50 years when nobody's there to build our roads, right? Like that's the reality of it. I mean, if we can't change a trajectory or the trajectory of how we view it, what we're putting out onto it, we're going to have this gaping hole in our economy and in our country's infrastructure that we can't really overcome without addressing it. Then those skills are going to be so much more valuable. And I'm like, all the times to get into it, please.
I just paid. So we had a clogged drain from our sink to our septic, and in Hawaii we don't have a septic. So
I have one here in Texas, but I didn't before, so I'm with you. It's new.
I was drilling, and I was using the auger, and I was like, I can't get it. And I'm like, I am not gonna pay a plumber. And I took all the pipes off, and I went even further. I went about 30 feet, and I still couldn't get it. And it was already cold here, so whatever grease was, it was just solid.
It makes sense.
So finally, we called a plumber, and we paid him $350.
Right.
And he was done in about 30 minutes. 30 minutes.
So it's funny. I posted something not too long ago, and I was posting. It was just a funny post. I felt like it was one of those things I was recording, and then I was like, the video isn't good, but like there's this one still where my face was like, I mean, I was totally grossed out. I'd replaced a flapper on a toilet. So it was really minor. But this thing had like disintegrated into just, I don't even know.
You talk about the wax seal had disintegrated?
So there's a oh my God, what's the word? Gasket. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. So there's a gasket. So the flapper falls and there's the gasket there. And so but it had just melted into goo. And it's still gross. And it was nothing. It was just melted, right? Or just like disintegrated. We have hard water here, so heavy sedimented too. So it's fine. But it was just a funny photo. And so I posted it, and somebody commented about how plumbers charge ridiculous amounts. And I defended plumbers in general. And here's why. I will say, is it? Yes. Okay. But I also know what their equipment and their truck, et cetera, costs. And those men and women, I admire them so much, because like the one time I've called a plumber since we bought our house was over the same issue that we had our septic backup. And I was like, this is outside of my pay grade. Cause here, when that happened, it was coming up out of our shower drain. And I was like,
Oh my god.
oh, I was like, I'm out. I just don't. It was like Christmas Eve too. I was like, I can't mess with this all night. I have like 15 people going to be here tomorrow. So there was just, I didn't have the bandwidth. And I was like, I just need somebody to fix it now. Right. Nicest plumber in the entire world. And him and I talked about this a lot about cool maintenance and stuff. It was really good conversation. And he charged, I don't remember what he charged. This was years ago. And it was our first experience with the septic too. So I was like, this is brand new to me. I've never had a septic system. So it was new from a lot of angles. And I honestly so I defended plumbers in general for that reason, because like it took him, your guy 30 minutes. It didn't take this man long either, an hour. He came out at 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve though. So like, shout out, they work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, no doubt, right? And yes, they make amazing money, but think about how many years it took them to get to a point where they could charge what they were charging, right? And so I always tell people, because the guy said, yeah, but sometimes it's, if they're just replumbing a sink, for example, right? It's pretty simple. People could do that. I'm like, right, but they're choosing not to. So if this man could do a job that's messier, right? Like septic, because that is a messy job. Okay.
Yeah. That's
If
worth
you're willing,
$350.
yes, 100%. Like I
Yeah.
didn't want to do it for sure. And I'm sure I think it was around the same that we paid, a few $100. If he can use an hour of his time to fix septic for $350 or to replumb a sink for $350, either way you slice it, if you're not willing to learn to replumb your own sink, you don't get to be mad about it. Like that's a choice to a point, right? Like there is
very true. Yeah.
It's a decision. And I don't judge. If it's not for you, like totally fine, but their time is worth that because they could do that other job making that. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's an interesting thing because I see both sides of it. I've been the homeowner on either side, and I've had the people come out where you spend all this money and they're like, haven't fixed it. And you're like, why did I pay you to do this? Like you had one job.
Well,
It's so frustrating.
And the truth is, I mean, if we're paying these prices now,
Yeah.
imagine if less and less people get into the field.
Well, and that's what I kind of sort of, in a roundabout way, I kind of run off on a tangent about it. But that's what's really scary to me is imagine 15, 20, 30, 50 years down the road. Like, what does that look like? And
it's going to be a luxury to get services like that.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think it's funny because within this realm, obviously I've had a great amount of demand, I think, for custom builds, right? And obviously I do quite a bit of renovations on my house. So a lot of the content that we see is me sort of putting sweat equity into my house, which means I don't take a job that week or I don't take a job that month because I'm like, I'm going to renovate this, right? So I built our pantry. I redid all of our exterior brick. I did a lime wash treatment to update it. I did
How big is your pantry?
So our pantry was a breezeway.
Yeah.
It is now 120 square foot pantry, which is pretty incredible. So the funny story is we have a decent sized house, but it was built in the 90s. And even by Texas standards, like I think our house 3,300 square feet back then. And then I added 120 for the pantry and I added 600 for the shop. So I've added quite a bit there. And it's funny because the pantry itself was like a shoebox. I mean, I was like, I have never had a pantry, even in our first house, which was 1,500 square feet. Our pantry was bigger than this. It was so ill-fitting. And I'm a cook. I love to bake and I like to do these things for the kids. And I was like, this is not going to work. So we had thought for a long time of like, how do I fix this pantry issue? And so when I was doing the shop, I was like, I'll just go ahead and frame in this breezeway. And so I had to pour a slab to bring it up to grade because it had dropped between the house and the shop or the garage. Just like a detached garage, right? And so I raised up the slab, framed it all in, and then that's my pantry. Honestly, the best use of space I've ever seen in my life. And it was kind of an odd, they had like a door there. So like you would come into the breezeway and it was like into our kitchen or into the garage, but then we also had a front door. So it kind of created like an odd security issue, if you will, because people could walk up to the side door and it was kind of concerning. I felt like, we live in a really safe area, but still like, I used to say in the apartment industry, crime doesn't have an address. I don't know.
Well, you live in the great state of Texas, so you
Yes.
guys have stand your ground doctrine.
We sure do. We sure do.
So anybody that's thinking about it, just remember
Don't.
you don't have to threaten her life. You just have to threaten her
Don't.
property. She has legal right
Yeah.
and authority to shoot you.
And it's funny that's it's such a controversial. I find it fascinating how like the media has spun stand your ground laws
Yeah.
I find it fascinating because I'm a big believer in, you know, if you're not doing something to threaten somebody, right? If you come on my property and I'm uncomfortable, like you made a choice. Like if you're not welcome, I'm not going to jump to that. I would hope to God, pray to God, I never am in a position to ever have to actually make a decision like that. But am I going to let my kid be hurt or like, am I going to? No, absolutely not. Like 100%. I'm sorry, but I'm not.
Well, just use a
No.
22 and don't use a hollow point. They'll be fine. It'll go right
Oh,
through
honey,
them.
my everyday carry is a 380.
So they'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
They might
I
be
mean,
hurting.
good luck to them.
Yeah.
I
You know,
honestly, we're laughing right now. I joke. I pray to God I'm never in a position to make that decision. I really do. I mean, it's, it's certainly not something I would ever relish, right? I feel a lot of immense sympathy and I truly hope I'm never in that position. But
yeah.
also, I mean, I'm not naive to the fact, like in fact, our last house, we lived in a really great area, great neighborhood. There was a string of break-ins and somebody had kicked in our front door when I was dropping my kids off at school. I was gone maybe 10 minutes. In fact, not even school, it was pre-K at that point and Ben's therapy. So I came back and saw all the door jambs separated and it just I mean, it was definitely one of those things that I was like, had I been home, I I just yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a weird
And,
perspective.
and that was in Texas.
Yeah. Honestly, a neighbor caught it on their camera. So we knew, I mean, it scared the crud out of me. And at the time we didn't carry, right? Like, I mean, I wasn't against it by any means. I've always been very like, this is an amendment. This is in our constitution. This is in our bill of rights. Like we have a right to protect ourselves. That's what it is. But it just wasn't something. I was certainly not raised around them. My parents are from up north, so a little different culture. And honestly, our entire family carries now. Like you just don't live in a world where you can't be prepared. But it was one of those occurrences that again, I think my son was maybe 5 at the time. So Abby would have been 3. And it was enough that I felt like my husband worked long hours. I just wasn't going to be in a situation where I needed to feel I was going to do what I could to protect my kids. It just was that simple.
You know, one of the courses I took in firearm safety.
Yeah.
One of the things they preach is, as an American, it is your fundamental right.
Right.
And duty, actually,
100%.
to be able to protect yourself.
Yes.
And it's actually your job to protect your family first.
Yes.
And law enforcement is amazing, but
they can't be there. They can't be everywhere all the time.
I don't have 3 minutes.
Right. And I think it's such an interesting, I think it's part of a little bit of like how, and I don't think this is how the bulk of people feel. Like, I don't think this is how everyday people feel. I think 90% of most of the individuals in the world, whether they align on their left, right, or center, right? I think they see the validity of most everything out there. And they know that a lot of what they're being told or hear or whatever is not all 100%. But I think everybody feels a sense of how the media has sort of made even a victim, they've made the bad guy the victim in a story, right? So like you can have a story clear cut as day and the person who's done the victimizing is now somehow the victim. And you're like, okay, understood. Like, it's a sad situation. And I always feel a ton of sympathy for people that are in situations they can't escape. Right. And I
Right.
certainly understand that, but I don't know. I think it kind of even circles back to, again, how we were talking about working, right? I think people feel like there's so much to overcome. And I think they're putting a lot of trust in things that aren't serving them in the big picture, right? Like, and when I mean their family too, right? Because I am nothing without my family, and that we are one as clear as it is. I don't know. I maybe that's just a wacky perspective, but I think there's something to be said for finding purpose and whether it's whether a man is a provider for your family or as a as a leader, right? I think there's some of that's kind of gotten missed, where
Yeah.
we're told, like, I mean, even economically, you can work 80 hours a week and not be able to pay your bills. Like, I understand where I really truly do understand where people are discouraged and frustrated. And, I mean, this is coming from somebody who's paying a mortgage and health insurance every month right now. Like, I fully, like, it's tough out there. It's tough. Well, I get it, but you can't give up, right? We have to hope that things, if enough people fight for what matters and what's important, which is, again, your family, providing for your family, creating a safe environment, I think the world's going to be better for it, and I don't know. But I think that has to start somewhere. That needs to be talked about. That needs to be the priority,
And
I don't know.
it
Maybe I'm
starts at
wild.
home. No,
It does. Yeah.
it starts at home for sure.
But it's scary a little to think about it, because you're like, where does it go if we can't correct, there has to be some correction. And it's certainly, again, it's not a right, left, or middle thing. It's just people are tired. I think
Yeah.
everybody's tired, right? Like,
Yeah.
you open the news and you're like, oh my God, what happened today? Like, it's hard. I mean, and life is beating you down again, so you had COVID and all the struggles with that. And then, like, for me personally, our son went through a lot, and then we had this spine. I mean, it hasn't stopped, it hasn't stopped. And, like, last year when all this stuff happened, my husband had to put his career on hold to be there for me with my surgery. Cause, like, I was the one who picked the kids up and dropped, you know what I mean? Like, you have to come together and find a way to support, right? Like, your family has to be, that's all you have at the end,
So if you don't mind me asking, what does your
Yeah.
husband do that gives you freedom to do what you do as well?
Yeah. So honestly, it's funny. He likes to say that he was in the car business for 20 years. He's worked particularly on the finance and management side,
Okay.
on the dealership levels, but always had a lot of hours.
Yeah.
He's shifted recently, still in the sales financial sector. It's hard to say, what the future will hold. Obviously, there's a lot of ever-changing things going on there, but he focused, like, when I had surgery, he focused on getting additional licenses in order to diversify, like, what options were open to him later. He obviously has seen, I always say that my business would not have been as successful as it was had I been forced to only make decisions based on money. Does that make sense? Like, I got
Totally. Yeah.
lucky 100%. And this is something that I fully would 1,000 times over say that it was such a blessing. I was able to say no to a lot because the money wasn't worth the time, right? Because my kids, and now obviously there was a lot of sacrifice with that too. I mean, there's no question I work 80 hours a week too, right? Like, when you open your own business, it's everything. And so as we got older, as our kids got a little older, when I really started the business full time, that has always now sort of takes precedent, if you will, because it's our family's legacy, right? So, like, and he'll say this, right? Like, he can leave one company to work for another, and it's just like any other corporate thing. And, like, he's like, at the end of the day, that doesn't say, like, Listi Ford or whatever, right? Like, that's not that's not where and he doesn't want to do that. But this is our legacy, and he was such a big part of building it with me. So I 1,000,000%, like, would have never been able to do it in any other circumstance if I didn't have his support. And he would say a million times he wouldn't have done and been as successful for all the years he was and is if it wasn't for me too. It's a team. You got to have each other's backs, and I was front and center, and I took the heat all the years at home for him, and he's done the same for me. Like, when I filmed the show, that was such a unique opportunity, because I had to be gone a lot. I filmed mostly in LA. It was very hard. I've never been away from my family that much. That was hard. I flew home every day off. It was ridiculous. I think the poor production team was like, Sarah's leaving again. But I mean, it was scheduled time off, right? Like, we weren't on set, but still, like, if like, say my flight got delayed and I wasn't there, that would cause a delay. So, like, I understood that had to be very stressful for them. I respect that for sure.
Okay, we gotta go there. Let's talk about the
Yeah.
show
Yeah.
and
It
tell us
was like the weirdest
how.
concept.
So tell us about the show, what it was about, and
Sure.
how long did you film or shoot for it?
Okay, so over the years, especially when I really became, more and more, I don't want to say popular, that's not the right word, but where I started to gain more notoriety within the media space in the power tool industry. And I've partnered with a lot of really great brands and companies and have had really some amazing opportunities. Had a lot of things I didn't have, obviously, too. But I've been offered a lot of TV spots, right? I think anytime, in my case, a woman in the industry, not to take away from skills, right? I'm sort of like I don't want to say the unicorn, but that was their reference. It was like, it's such a rare thing to find that there was obviously, as people were developing shows, they were like, how cool would it be if we could find a woman that could do that, right? And so I think that, to be fair, that had to played into it a little bit. But anyway, I got this call one day, or this message, actually, it was a message from a producer at Sony who said, hey, we're about to start filming the show, and I would love to talk to you about it if you're interested. And I was like, sure. And honestly, at first, I was like, there's no way this is legit. I get these messages all the time, and I've tested for stuff, and sometimes it just isn't the right fit, or timing doesn't work for me or them, or they just go in a different direction. That happens, right? So I see though that they shared their email, and sure enough, it was a Sony email address, and I was like, oh my god, how cool is that? All right, so I met with them, and it was the coolest concept of a show. Long story short, one of the producers behind CSI had written an episode where they found like a skeleton in a wall, and he was like, how cool would it be to talk about like how if a murder or a tragedy happens in a home, um, what happens to the house after that, right? Like it is kind of like, what? Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I have no idea. I mean, assuming people eventually buy it, right? Very true. And so essentially, Murder House Flip was born from, his name's Josh Berman. He's been involved in a bunch of stuff. Phenomenal human being. I really admire him as a person too. And so he was piloting this, and Sony and Roku had teamed up to produce it. And so I tested for it, and it just was a great fit. And my co-host Mikkel and I just really hit it off, and it was just a really interesting thing. Honestly, what attracted me to it was I had always said if I was going to travel and be away from my kids a lot, like I travel for trade shows and stuff, but if I was going to be gone that much, like I needed to feel like I was putting something good into the world. And I never would want to do anything that like my kids 5, 10, 15 years down the road aren't going to look back on and think like, I was so proud of my mom for that. And this just felt like the timing made sense. It just felt like the opportunity of a lifetime. And honestly, it was, you don't get those opportunities every day. And so it was, obviously, like I said, I had people approach me before, but you can talk about a lot of things. If you don't get the offer, if it doesn't work out, what does it matter, right? But this just felt right, and it ended up working out. And I ended up a few weeks later flying out to LA, and we filmed 5 episodes in LA, and then one in Phoenix, Arizona. That was the Joe Arias house, which was really wild. So all of these homes had like this tragic story where somebody was murdered or something really tragic had happened. And oftentimes, like in California, the statute of limitations was 2 years. So like if somebody bought a house, they didn't necessarily know this had happened. And maybe they find out after closing, which happened in a couple of cases. And some people found out right before closing, but like the California market at that time was so competitive that if they didn't go forward with the house, they weren't going to find something else. And so, there's a lot of heart there, and that you get to really take a space that has, yes, there's one really dark moment there, right? But there's so much healing, and there's so much more the house can do, and there's so much more it can serve, right? And I think there's something very like healing and therapeutic about it. It was a really cool experience, a lot of heart. I cried at every episode because it was so emotional to like have people come in and like see their home transformed. It was just, I don't know, I get emotional thinking about it now, but it was such a cool experience to be a part of, and it was so fun. And you really do become part of like a little family on set, and there's so many moving pieces, and I learned so much in that experience. It was just a once in a lifetime experience, that I can't imagine if I hadn't had, so eternally grateful for it because it was, like I said, it was a blast. I mean, it was so fun. I missed the kids a lot. That and my husband, it was so hard. I've never spent that much time away from them. I think the longest stretch was like 10 days. And I was like, by day 3, I was dying. I was like, oh my God. But we got through it and, you learn to connect in different and better ways. And so that was really cool. But I came home and then what's weird when you film a show is you couldn't talk about it, right? I
Yeah.
wasn't even allowed to tell people I was filming something. So we finished filming in February. So it was January and February that year. And then it didn't come out till August. So it was so weird because there's just months and you're almost like, by the time you can talk about it, you're so separated. So it's like so weird because it's like, wow, this is so crazy. But yeah, it was an amazing, just such a cool experience. I mean, such a gift of time and so many memories that I would be, I can't imagine not having now. In the show initially aired on Roku. I don't know eventually where it will find its new home. Hopefully it does because it was the coolest show in the world. But Roku ended up taking out a bunch of their titles just a few months ago. So until then, it was you can just go stream it for free. But now I don't know where it'll end up. We'll see.
Well, I think it's going to be in a vault, and they're going to
Yeah.
probably put it on a market for whoever wants to pay for it. Because that's a lot of these shows get sold to different,
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
So
it's very weird how it all works too. Like,
and
it's
it
interesting.
depends who owns the original, right? I'm guessing like, hey, no, they probably say no, I want more, and they're doing their back end deals.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I'll tell you this, Sarah, you are
funny.
really good on the front end, and I can't.
Thank
I would.
you.
This would be crazy to do a show with you. Like, obviously, there's no way I can do. I'm not good at the back end at all.
Yeah.
And I meant to tell you this earlier. You said your husband was he's in the car industry. I actually sold cars for 8 years,
Oh, that's awesome.
and I did really well. I didn't love it. I hated the hours. I hated working on Sundays.
The hours are hard. The
Yeah.
hours are hard. That's still very hard. I mean, like I said, he recently left. We'll see if it's for good. But I mean, he was in it for 20 years. And it was hard when our kids were young. That was very challenging.
Yeah. The fun part was doing finance because there's a lot more money on the back end.
And honestly, that's what he was the best at. So, and then he, by the time he left the car industry, he was a finance director, and he'd done like sales manager too. He's really worn a lot of hats.
Those are tough positions because those
They
guys
are.
get fired.
A lot of
quickly.
pressure.
Yeah, they get fired quick.
He thankfully never really ran into that. Like he was at a couple of stores. I mean, one for like 8 years and another for 10. So he's not really one to jump around. But I think at this point, our perspective changed a little bit on, especially as our kids started getting older and he wanted to be home with them a little bit more.
Yeah.
It was hard. I mean, he worked 6 days a week. I mean, he was off Sunday, but he was so exhausted, like he couldn't enjoy it. And it was definitely stressful. And so, especially right after the show, he had left the store he was at, it was like the day before I got that call, which made it even more interesting because I was like, how weird is it that I got this call like the day after, like where I would have normally immediately been able to, I can't be gone for that long. Like I can't be away, like my parents are local, but I'm need to be here for my kids, especially with Ben. Like he needs mom, like I'm the only one who knows day in, day out. Right. And so it was very like, it felt like the world was kind of telling me, hey, this is where you need to go. I hope that I do more TV at some point. I'm not like, it would be hard for me to travel and be gone from home as much, but I hope something works out. It was a cool experience. It was so much fun. And it's invigorating to be around other people. I think it's very healthy and good for like a creative mind, especially, and you get this too, right? Getting to be around other creatives, there's something about that fills a cup you can't fill any other way, It was just a cool, like I said, once in a lifetime thing. And if it never happens, obviously totally I'll be thankful for the memories and love it. But it was a blast. And getting to talk about things I love, like what a cool gift.
What would be an ideal TV show or project for you?
I could go a few different directions. I've pitched a couple ideas recently. I would love to do something in the educational realm. Like I would love to literally go into facilities that are making, different products for construction, for example, right? Or woodworking products. How is it made, right? Like that old cooking show where you're like, I think it was called How It's Made.
Yeah.
Or so yeah, so Alton Brown used to host it. It was
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
cool because you're like, how was your favorite licorice made? And it was fascinating to watch how this, I think doing that from like a construction spin or something similar would be amazing. Also, honestly, something I would love to do would be renovating spaces for families with kids with special needs. Um,
Ooh.
I know. So it would be hard for me in that the emotional, like I get emotional over furniture for like any typical scenario, right? I get emotional, like I said, every flag I've sold, like their stories are always so powerful. And knowing again how your art is taking place and is at a forefront in somebody's life, that's just overwhelming in the best way. This I think would be hard in that regard, in that I would be like a crying mess on every episode because just trying to think of everything. But I feel like it would be so worthy, and it would be such a beautiful thing to do for others, and to whether it's schools and creating like sensory rooms for schools that maybe don't have that advantage, or let's say a family has safety restrictions. Like one of the common things that I've been dealt with a little bit. I was obviously handy, so I had ways to work around it, but not everybody is. Eloping is a common thing, right? It's one of the hardest things I ever read a news story on is when a child is like walked out the front door in the middle of the night. And, I know people are like, why wouldn't their families lock the door? Kids are smart. Okay. And I
Yeah.
think there's, but I think coming up with ways to deter that or sound an alarm of some, yes, alarm systems are great, but if they don't set it or, there's so much there, additional window locks or whatever. There's so many things that I could do that would be amazing. Or even just creating spaces where, like in our situation, so our son is 13, but our daughter's 10. And so they're vastly different, in terms of, academic levels, right? And then how they relate to the world are very different. Abby is, neurotypical and does not have the same obstacles. I think finding ways for your family to relate where everybody is comfortable would be a really amazing. I just think would be an incredible space to be in. I think that would, I don't want to get emotional. I'll cry again. I think that would be really incredible too. I think that would. It's hard to imagine anything I could feel was more worth my time. But I also, switching gears again, I would love to walk in and show people how to create, like, oh, I saw this thing on Pinterest, this accent wall. I'd love to show people how to use tools to do enough of their own DIY. Like, I think that would be amazing too. I don't know. There's so much there, We'll
You know
see.
what I'm looking for right now is someone that can make me a custom sign in the background, and I've been looking for the
Send
guys.
me your logo. That's easy. That's nothing.
I would love that.
That's no big deal. Like
Okay,
that is so easy. I have a CNC and a laser, so like
oh my God,
it is so
Jesus.
easy. Like yeah, like the hardest part is picking out the backer and the color scheme. But yeah,
I don't even care. Whatever you.
I just want a logo.
Okay, I'll send you a logo today.
Yes. I've done my logo a couple of times actually. In fact, somewhere around here I have the big one that I keep meaning to finish, and one day I'll get the time. But yeah, the logos are so fun. But like that stuff's a total blast to create. Like, and that's even neat, right? Because so we talk about like the personal connection, and again, for me, this is a big part of why I think I love the process and the creativity and the problem solving, right? Like I've never had any project really go perfectly smooth. You have to think on your feet and think, okay, this is not going to work how I thought it would. What joinery can I switch to now to make this happen or whatever, right? I think it's such a gift though to be able to like, when you're like logos, that's like somebody else's life's work, right? And that I like that you get to bring to life. Like that's so, I mean, I'm romantic about it, right? Like I'm like, it's such a cool gift to be a part of, everybody.
You know who my hero, I mean, I don't like his content per se, but I appreciate what he's done for the podcast space. I love Joe Rogan's podcast.
Oh, he's amazing. Yeah. I don't always agree with a lot of what he says, but yeah, I'm with you on that he's you know what is amazing about Joe Rogan is his bravery, right?
Yeah.
It's hard. I avoid everything controversial in my day-to-day content because I
Yeah.
want people to feel like comfortable. I want my page to be a place where everybody is welcome, and I'm very careful about how I word because I want people to really feel that. But to have somebody be like that brave and like that fearless and like he faced a lot of repercussions, especially in those early years where he was really saying, you're not gonna tell me what I can't say. Like,
Yeah.
dude, I mean, it takes a lot. I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it, you got to have some big, like
Big cojones. Like
yeah, I was literally gonna say that.
he
Some incredible thing. Yeah.
it's crazy because he forged his own way.
Yeah.
His first deal with Spotify was 200 million,
So
and
crazy.
and
He just signed a new one for
250.
yeah. I mean, I was like, dang. I mean, it's funny because like talking about him, I'm a big believer, even when I disagree with people, I think it's that much more important to listen to them, right? I I don't always like, I mean, there's points where you're like, this person and I aren't going to find common ground, and that's fine. But I think there's a gift in you can learn more from people that don't see the world exactly the way you do than people that do, right? Because like you already know how you feel. So talking to a version of you is like not going to benefit you in terms of educating you, right?
Yeah.
I think that's maybe another aspect of like discourse that we've kind of lost in general because people are scared to say something and they're scared to like you can admire somebody and not agree with them, right? Like you can say this person's like again Musk, perfect example, controversial guy in a lot of ways. I think he's incredible for what he's done like on X.
So do
I
Yeah.
genuinely to face the amount of pushback he has faced and to stay strong, like I mean that's you can't again I don't agree with a lot but like
Yeah.
I admire the ever loving fire out of that like
Yeah.
and he has I think too, I always base like, and this goes for Rogan too, right? Intentions, right? Their intentions are always good. Maybe I don't agree with the execution, right? Or how they went about it, but like trust your instincts with people's intentions, like, if somebody's trying to cause harm or, you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Like,
I think it's good too for
yeah,
this generation to understand it, and without getting political, but it seems like one side or both sides, we'll just say both sides, but
yeah,
would preach a lot about freedom of speech, be able to say what you
yeah.
want to say, but yet here are these rules and things that you can't say. And I think Dana White, the UFC guy,
fascinating guy, fascinating guy.
On his podcast with Theo, and I love Theo Vaughn too, because
I do too. I think Theo's amazing. Yeah.
He's a lot smarter than he acts. I know that's his market. So
But I think that's why I love him, right?
Yeah,
He's a little bit of he's so smart, so successful, but I guarantee you could walk up to him and have a beer and walk away feeling like what a good guy. You know what I mean? Like he is who he is and he's genuine and I admire that so much.
his
Like,
one of his greatest podcasts, Theo Vaughn, is with Anthony Robbins.
okay, yeah.
He was bawling. He was
Dude.
bawling.
Well,
And-
him when he interviewed Dana White too, I found that to be when he like literally calls Peloton, I was like like
Dana
I
White,
mean
Dana,
that's
yeah.
amazing. Like,
Dana's like, no. Let me tell you how this works. It's like,
Yeah.
This is how it works. They don't tell you, you tell them.
yes. I mean that's yeah. I'm fascinated, so fascinated by people that are unapologetically authentic to themselves, right? And I think it's funny because you brought up like freedom of speech. I think that's such a fascinating thing, even in like comedy, right? Like this is another kind of off the cuff thing. Watching people like Matt Rife, right, get canceled was fascinating to me because I'm listening to this and I'm like, there has to be, I don't want to say safe spaces because it's kind of poking fun at the issue a little bit, but like if comedy is comedy and the goal is to laugh, then don't go to a comedy show and be like, this is so serious. I'm not saying what he said was cool. Like I didn't find it personally funny. So like, I'll be honest. I though wouldn't find it offensive per se. I just didn't think, I thought it was a little off color and like whatever. I would have just like kept scrolling and like, I would have just moved on, and I think I don't know, people that outrage people feel over, you didn't follow the rules. You can say whatever you want except for this and that. And you're like, okay, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's exhausting, right? And I think a lot of creators, and I think this has been a big deal on TikTok too. And I mean, again, that's how Rife started, right? Have gone through these like cancel things. And I find that's why I say nothing, because I'm like, again, I'm a woodworker, educational content. So like, I'll just say none of it. And I want to be a safe place for people, but it's also like, it's so hard to always like, I have opinions, I just don't share them really in a day-to-day basis. um but it's hard when people are unable to be honest, and we
Yeah.
want people to be authentic, but then if we don't agree with that authenticity, that's bad too. Like, I mean, it's a double-ended sword, and then how some people, again, and this is maybe a right left thing a little, but some people are like instantly forgiven too. Cause like I hear some things and I'm like, now that's offensive. Like that
Yeah.
is offensive no matter who
Yeah.
you are. And then they're like, it's just like not in the news the next day. And you're like, how? I mean,
Yeah.
like I mean, it feels like there's multiple standards for multiple. It just depends on who's offended. And I don't know. I think it's kind of an unhealthy thing. That's something like Candace Owens, right?
Yeah.
Obviously a very polarizing figure for good reason. Fair. That's fair. I don't agree with
I,
everything she says,
I'll
you
tell you
know.
who's very polarizing, and well, my wife and I watch him every day. Is Jesse Lee Patterson.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He is so offensive but funny, and I would love to meet him in person.
I think offensive stuff is like, isn't that kind of why it's funny to a
Yeah,
point? Like,
exactly.
they're not calling you as an individual. They're just making fun of something, right? Like, I don't know. It's kind of wild, like that it's gotten to that. I don't know. Why are we so fragile? Like,
Yeah. Well, the fact that the last guest he had that I saw, it was a black guy who is a pastor and gay,
yeah.
and
Okay.
when he asked the guy, so is your man, is he your husband or your wife? As soon as he said that, the guy got so upset. And I know Jesse Lee Patterson did that to kind of
Yeah. To poke
provoke
the
a
bear a
little
bit.
bit,
Right.
poke the
Yeah.
bear, and that's how Jesse Lee Patterson operates. But it goes to show people like him, Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn. I think is in that space too,
Yeah.
where
He
I'm
kind
gonna,
of rides the line a little. Like,
yeah, I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say, and I
yeah.
want to tie this into your brand partnerships and sponsorships.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
for me, I'm not anywhere near that space in terms of like what I say, what a company. None of the
Sure.
companies say. None of them tell me what I can and cannot say.
Right.
One of them does say just be careful or mindful of what you post with our name
Sure.
on it.
Right.
Um, but I'm about to drop one of my companies that I partner with, and I'm going to go with a competitor. I can't say who. I'll announce it next week. And it's just a simple decision that I don't feel comfortable with the way that I've been treated. So I'm just going to go to
Sure.
another company, and no bad blood or anything. It's just I don't have to plaster their name, but I
Right.
don't feel the need to like limit what I say about them. I think if people ask, I'll tell them. Say I'm
Sure.
just being honest. If find a company that's willing to work with you, and if they don't, there's other companies. There's thousands of companies and products that
It's
So for you, like, how many companies do you have that you work with right now?
so I've worked with a lot. I work with a lot of different companies, honestly. I've got some really great sponsors that I've worked with for a long time. Most of them I've been with really since Toll Girls Garage started to some degree. Where either, initially it was product only and then it became, we're a paid sponsor. Um, I've never been told not to say something. So I'll be honest that now, can I say that all of them would be like obsessed if I openly like criticized them? Probably not. I mean, I'm sure I'd hear that, right? But I'll be honest, I'm very careful who I align myself with,
Right,
whether it's a brand or other people, whatever. Like, I'm very careful that I'm only gonna, like, if I wouldn't buy it, I'm not gonna tell you to buy it. Okay. So like that,
right,
and that's me, because I know how important it is, like your credibility. If you sacrifice that, you can't get it back, right? Once you've lost people's trust, it's gone. So it's in from the get go. Again, I had the luxury of being able to say no at times when I felt uncomfortable about something. I was able to say, like, I'm not good with this. This doesn't work for me, or there's too many restrictions on this, or I've seen how they've treated others. And I know that, like, if I'm working with, I mean, we're just going to use a generic. Let's say I'm promoting Coke one day, and then a month later I'm promoting Pepsi. If Coke is mad, then I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, you don't get to tell me what I can do forever, right? Like, we have an agreement. And if this agreement is done, we're done, And so, like, if let's say I had seen Coke judge others for things, right? Like, or be overly, Coke is never going to sponsor me, so it's an easy thing for me to say. And again, I love Coke, nothing against them. But if I've seen a company tell people, don't say this, don't say that, don't say this, don't compare us to this, word this, then I'm out right away. And I think that's in the creator space. I'll be honest, we do talk a lot, right? So we all have conversations about what it was like to work with this brand. Would you recommend them? I think that is something brands have caught on to more recently, where I think they are a little more aware too, that, like, hey, people have options too. They can say no to us, And so I think there's a little bit of, it just has to be respect both ways, and that's not to be on them too. I've also seen people where I'm like, I can't believe this brand was okay with them saying this, like, there are extremes of that. Flip side, my decision not to talk about a lot of political, and even here, we didn't really talk about political things. We talked about my personal opinion on certain things, but these are God-given rights, in my opinion, right? Like, I'm a constitutionalist, if nothing else. I don't think it's a right, left, center thing. I think, I don't talk about a lot of those big social issues, et cetera, not because I'm afraid of backlash from a brand, although I'm sure it would happen. I'm sure that would be, if I got too far into it, if I talked about it too much, and it's not because they would, maybe whether they disagreed or not, I'm here to talk about woodworking and to educate, right? I want to tell my story. My story is sometimes going to have controversial things in it. That's not an argument either. But I want people to feel welcome, right? So that's why I avoid it, not because anybody's told me to. And I think at the point where somebody is telling you what you can and can't say, you have to question if what you're doing is right. Because, like, to me, there's no amount of money for somebody to tell me, don't say this, don't say that. Like, especially, again, it's not within my niche, but if I chose to say certain things or to talk about, I would expect or hope that people would be supportive of that, as long as it was within the realm of space, right? Flip side, I also am not one that goes out and makes a lot of critical content either, to be fair. Like, I'm trying to uplift and I want to motivate, I want to encourage, so I tend to avoid anything that's, like, if I don't like something, I don't necessarily need to say, I hate this, like, I just don't talk about it, right? Like, and that's just my personality too. I try to stay pretty positive in the zone and enjoy what I'm doing. And I feel like if it takes a negative turn, I'm not going to be, that's not authentically me either, right? So it's, like, it would be hard, I think, for me to, it would be so hard if somebody was like, you can't say this. I just want to say that. Like, so I guess I'm lucky that I've never been put in that position, because it would be almost impossible for me to say anything but that now. Like, it would be hard.
One of your coolest partnerships is what you're wearing, I think, right? Your earphones.
Oh, Isotunes. So, it's funny. I partnered with them a couple years ago, but I still use them because I love them. They're great products. I've been offered other companies that have come around, and I don't really have a financial arrangement with Isotunes. I mean, last time I think they sent earbuds was a couple years ago at this point.
Yeah.
But they're great products. And so, again, this goes to, I am always going to support things that I think are awesome, whether it fits with me or not. For example, my tool racks behind me, right? I've partnered with Bora Tools for years. They were, in fact, I was part of their pilot program when they first started doing, like, creator content partnerships. So people see them every day in my background, right? But would I use them if they didn't work? No. Like, I bought them myself, half of them. Like, they've sent some in the recent years, but I think that's, I don't know. I mean, so much of my tools I bought, and I think
it's not as glamorous as people think, because
whenever expectations.
Now, I do make it sound fancy when I say this has been brought to you by. The truth is, not every time I say that it's paid for, I'm getting money for it. It's
right.
I'm being prophetic. So when I
Right,
say
right.
this now, one of the companies they do pay. There are companies that pay.
Sure.
Per like one of the agreements I have is if I do X amount of posts, this is what they'll send. And then
Sure.
commissions, whatever. And the truth, the reality is, we got to buy our own products too. It's not like,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm very lucky. I've worked with a lot of great companies. I've worked with Skill Power Tools since they relaunched under Shervon. I've worked with Ego, Flex. Bosch is one of my great partners, Dremel. I've had some amazing partnerships. But it's not always monetary, right? That's
yeah,
part of it often, but it's not always the case. And honestly, I think, you know, partnerships have evolved a lot over the last few years where I think we're going to see more partnerships that are financially motivated because people and companies value more the time that goes into creating content, right? So I think that that's something people don't understand is they think, oh, well, you edited a post, right? But I combined 8 hours of work in 5 minutes or
yeah,
30 seconds of a post. Or it took me weeks of planning. Like they don't see the back of it, right? Like the front and the back end of content creation is so much more involved than people realize. And I think that that's, I appreciate when brands are willing to support creators of all sizes and of all levels, right? Where they're saying like, hey, we support what you're doing. We get that this is time and money, and your time is worth money, right? Um, and I appreciate that a lot. I think that that's something I hope we keep seeing, happen and continue to grow.
yeah. Well,
But so you mentioned rapid fire
yeah,
questions, so I
of
want to
course.
hear all of these. This is my favorite part of your podcast, so I'm excited. I can't wait to hear this.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for your time.
Oh, I'm so happy.
First of many, I believe.
I hope
Um,
so. I hope
and
you have me back.
of course, I think there's so many ways that these podcasts can go, and I think we're both comfortable doing this.
Yeah.
The front end of it, and so I just want to say thank you to your
Thank
family
you.
for giving you to us for this amount of time, and
Oh,
very
I love it.
grateful.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'll send you the logo today.
You
So
better. Don't forget. I'm excited. I'll send you my email so I can send me a high res version of it.
okay, it'll probably be a PNG possibly,
Oh yeah, I
or
can convert it. Yeah, that's no problem.
okay.
I'm so excited to do it. I'm just so glad I got to do this. Thank you so much for having me because it was an absolute honor. I think I told you I followed you for a while and I'm a huge fan of your content. I think you're amazing. I hope you keep being amazing because we
Well,
need voices like you out there.
this is just a chapter of my life. I don't know how far it'll go. I started out as a location based content creator,
Oh,
showing
okay.
beautiful things. I would rarely sit down and talk with a face. I would always show beauty, or I'd be in the ocean live streaming. So
Oh,
I'm
that's
enjoying this.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this
Yeah.
space. So
You
I'm
got to
very,
keep evolving, right? I think that
yeah.
there's something to be said for taking what you're doing and being like, hey, okay, we're gonna this happened. Now I need to pivot, and there's so much good in that. You find things you never knew you were gonna love.
So family, if you want to connect with Sarah, go to her website, twogirlsgarage.com.
Yes, that's
And that
it.
is her handle, Two Girls Garage, I believe, on all socials as well.
Yes, yes, everywhere. You can pretty much find me everywhere. If there's new platforms, I'll get there eventually.
All right, question number one: why did you do this podcast?
Because you asked me to, and again, I was a fan. I thought the conversation was cool too. I thought the start of this was amazing, and I think anytime we can talk about working hard and appreciating hard work, there's so much that can be gained from that. So I'm honored to be included in the mix.
Do you have cows on your property?
No, but I wish I did. I want a mini cow really bad. They're so cute. But I have chickens, a lot of chicken.
How many chickens do you have?
43 chickens.
43.
I told you chicken math is a real problem. Okay. Next time we'll have to get into the whole chicken math thing,
We'll
but
do a chicken
it's a
build.
problem. Yes, yes. Chickens are amazing though. They're so fun.
I'm trying to pronounce the word correctly. Alpaca or llama?
Ooh, a llama, I think, because they're very cute. I don't know how useful either of them would be here in Texas, but They're very cute.
Now I've eaten alpaca backstrap.
Okay.
It's a very good meat to eat.
Oh,
Uh, but
interesting.
the llama spit at you.
Yeah, so that was why I almost hesitated. And it's funny because I had antelope recently, which was very gamey. Okay. I was a little surprised because we eat a lot of cool, like bison's amazing. There's all kinds of cool meats out there. Um, but I was surprised. So I wasn't curious about I've never had alpaca, so that's going to be on my list of to try.
It's like a tender meat that looks like pork,
Oh,
but it
yum.
kind of tastes like in between beef and it's weird. It's a weird meat.
That sounds right up my alley. I'm here
Yeah.
for it.
Dodge truck or Ford pickup?
Ford. My daily driver is a Ford F-150 Platinum. I love it.
Those trucks are not cheap. They used to be. Now they're
No,
like in it. Yeah, six figures
no.
now.
Mine is paid off though. It's not a new one. It's a 2016. So I've had it a while and I hope it lasts me many more years because I look at price tags now and I'm like, no, mama's not buying that. Not in a million years would I pay that price.
So Hollywood calls you tomorrow.
Yes.
Say we've got a full season of whatever 16 episodes. We need you to fly out tomorrow.
Hmm.
What do you say?
I mean, I guess it would depend what the idea was. I mean, in theory, tomorrow would probably be a no. I don't even know if I could get a flight tomorrow. No, it's so much of it. If I do any other, like, it has to be something I believe in. It has to be something. If I'm going to take time away from my family, I didn't get into this because I wanted to be famous or want to star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Obviously, being in that sphere is amazing and it's humbling and it's great when people are like, "Oh, hey, I saw you on." That's amazing. I mean, it's a shocking feeling. But I'm a mom first and a wife first, and then the rest of it is after that. I'd have to know that I could continue doing what I need to by everybody here. And then also too, all the partnerships that I have, I'm not going to take those for granted. But if a cool opportunity came up, 100%, I would love to do it more.
This is a
Maybe
shop
not
question.
tomorrow.
So here's a shop question.
Okay.
If you had a choice, $100,000 worth of wood, and
Ooh.
you only got two choices: exotic, Pacific / wood from Asia and Southeast Asia, or $100,000 worth of American wood. Which one would you pick?
Ooh. I mean, so gosh. I guess I'd have to say exotic because it'd be cool to work with stuff I'm not as familiar with. But it's not an easy decision because the US has a massive range of species. I mean, maple, oak, walnut. I mean, there's sequoia, redwood. I mean, my God, there's so many species of what that's not an easy one. But I'd have to say why there's amazing species out there that I probably never worked with that I would love to. Probably that I've never even heard of.
Homeschool for your kids or public or private school education? It's actually a double question, but public and private in the same. So homeschool or exterior education?
We've done private school and they're in public school right now. We've talked a lot about homeschooling. So I don't know. I think everybody has to decide kind of what makes sense for them, right? For us, I think so far the benefit of socialization and being around friends and having those connections that I couldn't give them individually at home is there, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that it's really hard come every August when they go back to school and how much I feel like they also get from just learning from me every day, right? And being in the shop and I don't know. I mean, I see both benefits to both, but I feel like eventually we're going to be homeschooling just because it's a weird world out there now. Okay. And kids are mean. I hear stories and I'm like, what is going on? So I don't know. That's a tough one. Depends on where you are too. What school district are you in? Right now we're in a good one. So
that's good.
I don't know. Yeah. And you pay for that, right? Paid so much to get to a place where you could do that. We worked really hard to get there, you get how that is.
So this is a shop question.
Okay.
I'm doing a railing. It's about 7 inches, 7 to 8 inches in
Okay.
width. Spray lacquer or roll it with the lacquer.
Spray for sure. I
Okay.
mean, I spray anywhere I can. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, but if you have a good sprayer and you have the right equipment and you can protect other surfaces well enough, spraying is always going to give you the best finish. Yeah, spraying for sure if you can. But I've rolled too, and I've also wiped on with just oil. So it really depends. But if you're man, spray. The results are hard to beat.
I've had to roll lacquer in so many places because of where it's
Yeah,
windy and
it's
it's
hard.
yeah, and it's hard. You couldn't enclose certain areas, so
Yes, and it takes longer because you don't have to prep and clean up the same way, right? But you have to sand more between coats than you do with spraying, right? To get a
yeah.
really good finish. So I mean, spray every time you can, but I mean, when you sometimes you don't get a choice. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, you know.
And I hate wearing respirators, so
I know, I know. That part does that is the worst part of spraying is that smell is like the
yeah.
fumes are horrible. Yes.
Well, I'll tell this quick story, and I'll rush through the last two. I
Okay.
was spraying one time, and it's like I'm tired of wearing a mask. I didn't wear a mask, and one of my friends was like, "Why are your eyes so big?" And my pupils were like literally,
No. Oh my
yeah,
God. So I've got migraines from smells, even with the mask. So like I'm so sensitive to smell that like I have to be so careful. But dude, you got like high on it. That's awesome.
yeah. My eyes were like literally dilated. It's like, what's wrong with your eyes? I'm like, what are you
That's
talking about?
amazing.
Yeah,
Like you could not like you could never have reproduced that story any other way. That's
no.
awesome.
Question number 9:
Okay.
money or finances and time not an issue. Where are you packing your bags and taking your entire family for a 3-week vacation?
Oh my gosh. Ironically, Hawaii's been on the list. I'd love to go to Hawaii. I'd love to take them to Europe. I think there's so much over there that I have never seen that I'd love to take them to. Yeah, I mean, I would say one of those would be pretty cool. Yeah, that or like a really cool road trip, like in an RV where you get to like drive through the
Yeah,
US. That'd be cool.
full on glamping. I would get the
Yeah.
coat.
I was a Girl Scout though, so I grew up like rustic camping. So like the glamping now is kind of funny, but it's also like I appreciate it a lot. 100%.
All
As long
right.
as the dogs could come, you know.
Oh, what kind of dogs do you have?
I have two yellow labs. They're amazing. They're like Miter
Oh,
and Chip. They're named after tools, or Chip is named after the Australian term chippy, which is a carpenter.
those are very smart dogs.
So they're such good dogs, best dogs ever.
Yeah.
Like would not trade them for $1 million, like
We
ever.
have we have two bulldogs and they are so stubborn.
Oh, they're so cute though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ours are very, but honestly, we have the quintessential lab that's like super chill and just like, wants to like hang around and do whatever. And then we have like the gun dog that would like have been such a good bird dog that like you could train him so quick. Whereas Miter would take a little longer. You'd have to find better motivation. Still smart, just whatever.
Last and final question.
All right.
What? And I'm sure if you watch my podcast, this is the same question I ask everybody: is what is your desire? It can be either for this generation or for the next generation. What is your
Oh,
desire?
oh, man, that's a good one. I would love to see people learn to really center themselves. I feel like I think I've gone through this. I know everybody goes through this. We've talked about a lot of things that kind of are all over the board. I think people have to learn not only to think for themselves, but like to center themselves, like in their joy, accepting where they're at, what they need to work on, learn to be really honest with themselves about their benefits, flaws, right? Like the good, bad, and the ugly. I think people aren't as frank with themselves as they need to be, right? I think once you're honest with yourselves, you can be honest with others. And that was something I didn't get till it took time. And I'm an old soul, right? So I was always really introspective and always really thought of things a lot. But I feel like Money is not going to buy you happiness. You can be with a million different people. That's not going to bring you joy. The things that matter are the things that, like, at the end of the day, you cannot buy. And so I think learn, like, really accept that, embrace the things that matter, and learn to just center, get right there where it matters, and learn to be authentically honest with yourself, because the life is so short to not to be anything other than who you are. If you're not happy, what are you doing? What's it worth, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a lot, but I hope that makes sense.
No, it's good.
Think
And
for yourself, it's important.
well, I want to just say thank you again. We're going to play your socials right before we end it. But if
Awesome.
anybody wants to connect with Sarah, it's Two Girls Garage on all
Yeah.
socials. Also, her website is the same, twogirlsgarage.com. And I'm just so blessed, grateful, honored. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. I'm so
Uh,
glad I got to come on. I appreciate you so much.
Well, first of many, hopefully. And I will
Yes.
say this. Actually, after we officially get off air, if you can just hang out just for a minute or two,
Sure, yeah, go for it.
and we'll say our goodbyes officially. So
Oh.
let's play this quick promo and then we'll end it.
Thank you.
They say I'm young, they say I'm dumb, but what they don't know, it's where I've been and who I am, all the ways I've grown. Blood and the sweat, tears and regret, made me hard as stone. On my own, put the work in, yeah, I earned it, it's my destiny. Yeah, I'm on top, can't be stopped, shooting my shot. Oh, 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 yeah, I'm the one, I'm a legend, get what I want. Oh, 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 yeah, I'm on top, can't be stopped, shooting my shot. Oh, 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 yeah, I'm the one, I'm a legend, get what I want. Oh, 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 do a double take, see me on fire, see that I can't break. Knew I'd be great, knew I would rise through all of the pain. All of the love, so within now, keep a revolve faith, never change. Put the work in, yeah, I earned it, it's my destiny.
You definitely put the work in. You earned it. So thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome.
So I'm going to end it and I'll talk to you on the back end, okay?
Sounds good. All right.
Well, fam, thank you for joining us. And for those of you on replay, and we thank you for those of you that are carving time out of your day. And I know this is a different time for me. Sometimes people actually work in a day. So for those that are that have been in the live on YouTube, Twitch, and I think I've seen it on Kick, thank you very much. Appreciate you guys. Make sure you do follow Sarah on all her socials, and we're just grateful to have you here. Thank you to Archon Mounts who have been so gracious in giving out products. I will be announcing a giveaway sometime next week. I just have to make sure it's all cleared by then before I officially announce the giveaway. So, family, on behalf of Sarah and myself and our families that gave up time so you can get a little bit of her story and just hear on what's out there in terms of not just content creation, but even work and things that are available to the average American that if you just watch a few YouTube videos, you can become an expert, just like Sarah. I'm just kidding. It takes years. But thank you guys. We love you guys. As I always say, thank you for your time, your hearts, if you've been tapping on the screen on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. But thank you most of all. Just thank you for your time. You could be anywhere else, but you chose to be here. So from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you. Love you. God bless you guys. Ahui ho, aloha, and mahalo. Yes, sir. Chew.